There is a prison with no walls, no bars, no guards, no locked door. You built it yourself, one small agreement at a time. And the strange part is you don't even remember signing the contract. The contract says this: you will be loved as long as you stay who they expect you to be. Most people think power looks like this: a room full of people nodding along, applauding, approving. More followers, more praise, more people saying you're important. They spend decades polishing that image, convinced that influence is something other people hand to you. But here's the part almost nobody wants to hear. That belief is exactly why they never get powerful. Watch the people who are hardest to manipulate. Really watch them. They are not the ones managing how a room perceives them. They've stopped playing that game entirely. Instead, they've mastered something far harder to fake: command over their own mind. That's the real story. Everything else is decoration. Somebody is influencing every decision you make. Sometimes it's obvious: a demanding boss, a manipulative partner, a friend who makes you feel small until you comply. But most of the time, the hand on the wheel is invisible. It's the fear of disappointing someone, the fear of missing out, the fear that if you stop proving your worth for even a week, you disappear. Sit with that for a second. How many choices in your life were actually yours? How many times did you say yes while every nerve in your body was screaming no? How many roads did you not take because someone else's opinion weighed more than your own instinct? It never arrives all at once. Control doesn't storm the gates. It seeps in. One unnecessary apology, one postponed dream, one small compromise repeated until it hardens into identity. And then one morning you wake up in a life that photographs beautifully and feels like a stranger's. Most people call that adulthood. Machiavelli would have called it something else. Dependence. Not dependence on money, not on status. Dependence on permission. He wrote about princes and courtiers, but one idea buried inside his work has outlived every throne he ever described. Anyone who cannot govern themselves will eventually be governed by someone else. Before you influence a single person out there, you have to become difficult to manipulate in here. That fight doesn't happen in a boardroom. It happens against a version of you that negotiates with fear every single day. Picture two people, same office, same salary, same degree hanging on the wall. One walks into every meeting asking, "Do they like me?" The other walks in on asking, "Am I acting on my own values?" Small difference, practically invisible. Give it 10 years. The first person becomes a weather vane. Every compliment a gust of wind. Every criticism a storm that knocks them sideways. Their entire sense of self is on loan, and the interest rate is brutal. The second person is building something quieter. Something you can't see from across the room. Internal authority. And once a person actually has that, something strange starts happening around them. People stop sensing desperation. Negotiations shift in their favor. Doors that were closed start opening. Not because life got easier, but because the person walking through them is no longer begging for emotional permission to move. This sounds simple. It isn't. Your mind has spent a lifetime training for the opposite. Good grades, good behavior, good employee. Somewhere in that long parade of gold stars, being accepted quietly replaced being real. And almost nobody notices the swap happen. It doesn't just cost you money. It costs you the thing money was supposed to buy back: yourself. Here's the paradox that runs underneath all of it. The more desperately you need approval, the easier you are to steer. The easier you are to steer, the less freedom you actually have. And the less freedom you have, the harder it becomes to build real wealth, real relationships, or real power, because all four of those things are grown from the exact same soil. Self-mastery. Not because it makes you flawless, because it makes you predictable to yourself and completely unreadable to everyone trying to pull your strings. But that's only the surface, because mastering yourself doesn't start with discipline. It starts with exposing the invisible force that's been quietly writing your decisions for you. And until you can name it, you will keep mistaking obedience for character and comfort for control. It isn't your boss. It isn't your family. It isn't society, whatever that word even means. Those are just amplifiers. The signal comes from somewhere closer. Psychologists have a clinical name for it. External validation. Measuring your own worth by other people's reactions. It sounds harmless, almost polite. In reality, it's one of the oldest forms of control ever discovered, older than any government. Because the moment your emotional state depends on someone else's opinion of you, your decisions quietly stop belonging to you. That's why some people can never say what they actually think. They rehearse conversations that already happened. They apologize for things that were never their fault. They are not weak. They are negotiating in real time with an audience that isn't even in the room. Imagine walking through a crowded street holding a mirror in front of your own face. Every step depends on how the reflection looks. You stop watching the road. You're watching yourself through eyes that exist only in your imagination. That is how millions of people move through their entire lives. Every conversation becomes a performance. Every achievement becomes a request for applause. Every failure becomes a public verdict. Read out loud in a courtroom that never actually convened. But study the people who built lasting influence, not the viral kind, the real kind, and you find the same fork in the road every time. There was a moment when pleasing everyone became less important than respecting themselves. Not because they stopped caring about people, because they stopped renting out their identity. Here's the layer almost nobody talks about. Validation isn't addictive because praise feels good. It's addictive because uncertainty feels unbearable. Your brain is a certainty-seeking machine. Someone approves of you. For one warm second, you feel safe, protected. Then it fades, and you need it again. A compliment, a promotion, a new follower count, a better title. The reward evaporates almost the instant it arrives, and the hunt starts over. The exact same loop that has you refreshing a feed at 1 a.m., comparing your unfinished life to a stranger's highlight reel. The object changes, the mechanism never does. And once you can actually see the mechanism, you understand why brilliant, talented people stay stuck for decades. They're not chasing emotional independence, they're chasing emotional income. Think of the last big decision you postponed, a career change, a business. Ending something that had already ended a long time ago. Telling someone the truth. What actually stopped you? Was it really a lack of ability? Or was it the fear that somebody, somewhere, wouldn't approve? Be honest with yourself for a moment. There's a decent chance you've spent years negotiating with an opinion that was never even spoken out loud. That's the unsettling part. Sometimes the prison doesn't have guards anymore, just memories. A teacher who taught you to doubt yourself before you'd even formed an opinion. Parents who rewarded obedience over curiosity. Friends who mocked ambition because it exposed how little of it they had. The people are long gone. Their voices still vote on your decisions. This is where the Machiavellian lens gets uncomfortably personal. Machiavelli noticed that rulers who depended entirely on public loyalty lived in permanent, low-grade panic. Their confidence rose and fell with the mood of the crowd. Their power wasn't owned, it was borrowed, and borrowed power always comes with a due date. Ordinary life runs on the same mechanics. If your confidence depends on applause, it can vanish the instant the applause does. Real power starts the moment your own standards outweigh the crowd's opinion. That doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you load-bearing. Picture two entrepreneurs launching identical businesses on the same day. The first spends the opening weeks wondering if people will laugh at the idea. The second spends those same weeks improving the product. A year later, everyone assumes the second one simply had more confidence. Confidence wasn't the cause. It was the result of where they chose to point their attention. One managed perception. The other mastered reality. That single fork compounds for a decade. You'll find the same split everywhere you look. One employee spends meetings trying to sound smart. Another spends meetings asking better questions. One investor chases the loudest headline. Another studies the business quietly while the room reacts to the news. One person fills every silence with noise because stillness feels like exposure. Another creates silence on purpose, because that's exactly where clear thinking lives. On the surface, these look like unrelated habits. Underneath they're the same operating system, running two different modes. One is optimized for approval, the other is optimized for mastery, and mastery compounds. Approval never does. It just gets spent. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable, on purpose. Most people believe self-mastery means suppressing emotion. Go numb, stay stoic, pretend not to care. That's not mastery. That's just a different flavor of control. And it usually collapses at the worst possible moment. Real self-mastery starts earlier than that. It starts with observing yourself before you try to change anything. Notice how fast your mood shifts after one piece of criticism. Notice your posture change around someone confident. Notice how easily a stranger's life steals your attention from your own. Notice how often your own goals quietly get rewritten into someone else's expectations. Most people skip this step. Observation feels passive, so they rush past it toward fixing themselves. It isn't passive, it's the whole hinge. Observation creates awareness. Awareness creates choice. And choice is the exact coordinate where freedom begins. Without awareness, habits run the show on autopilot. With it, those same habits become visible. And the second something is visible, it can be challenged. This is exactly where almost everyone stops. Because seeing the truth about yourself is uncomfortable in a very specific way. It's easier to blame the traffic, the economy, the boss, than to admit you've been handing your decisions to fears that were never yours to begin with. But the people who eventually become impossible to control all walk through this same door. They stop asking, "How do I change my life?" and start asking something far more dangerous. Who inside me has actually been making my decisions this whole time? That answer doesn't just explain your past. It decides whether you'll ever hold the kind of quiet power that no job title, no bank balance, and no public recognition can hand you. So how do you take apart a system that's been running your life for years? Not with motivation. Motivation resigns the moment life gets uncomfortable. Not with willpower either. Willpower is like holding your breath underwater. It works, right up until it doesn't. Real change happens at the level of identity. Every action you repeat is a vote for the person you believe yourself to be. Believe you're someone who needs approval, and you will unconsciously manufacture situations that supply it. Believe you're someone who governs yourself, and your decisions start following an entirely different set of rules. Self-mastery isn't a habit you bolt on. It's an identity you build. And every identity runs on a small set of governing principles. The first, separate your emotions from your decisions. Not the same as going cold. It means refusing to let a temporary feeling sign a permanent contract. Think about the decisions people regret most. Quitting in anger, spending to impress, firing off the reply at midnight, saying yes out of fear, torching years of progress over one bad week. None of those happened because someone lacked intelligence. They happened because emotion briefly took the wheel. Machiavelli understood something that hasn't aged a day. A ruler who reacts emotionally becomes predictable, and predictability is an open invitation to be manipulated. The colleague who knows exactly which button to press has power over you. The stranger's comment that ruins your entire evening has power over you. Every emotional reaction is data. The real question was never whether you feel something. It's who takes the wheel once the feeling shows up. The strongest people don't feel less. They simply refuse to let the feeling drive. Next time something detonates in you, don't ask, "How should I respond?" Ask a sharper question. Who is responding right now? The frightened version of me, or the person I'm actually trying to become? That question buys you a half-second of space between the spark and the explosion. And inside that half-second, real power quietly moves in. The second principle: guard your attention like it's the only currency that actually matters, because it is. Most people treat attention as free. It isn't. It's auctioned off minute by minute all day long. A notification lights up, you look. A headline is engineered for outrage, you click. Someone's curated life scrolls past, you compare. By the end of the day, your attention has been rented out to a dozen people who profit from your distraction. And you're left wondering why your own goals never seem to move. Two people wake up tomorrow. The first reaches for the phone before their feet touch the floor. 30 minutes later, they've absorbed a stranger's outrage, a stranger's advertisement, and a stranger's edited highlight reel, all before making a single decision of their own. The second person starts differently. 10 quiet minutes, a notebook, one hard priority named on paper. The world can wait its turn. By lunch, both have lived the same number of hours. One directed their attention. The other donated it. This looks small. It isn't, because attention becomes thought. Thought becomes choice. Choice becomes identity. And identity becomes the whole trajectory of a life. The wealthy protect capital. The wise protect attention. The powerful protect both, without exception. Every yes you give away costs more than time. It costs identity. Every obligation accepted out of guilt, every commitment made to avoid disappointing someone, is quietly shaping the person you're becoming, whether you notice or not. Which is why boundaries were never walls. They're filters, deciding which influences even earn a seat at the table. History backs this up. The leaders people actually trusted weren't the ones who said yes to everyone. They were trusted precisely because their decisions couldn't be bought with praise or bent by pressure. Consistency built the trust, not popularity. The same math works at your kitchen table. The moment your values hold steady, regardless of who's watching, people stop trying to negotiate with your standards, because they've learned your standards were never for sale. There's a layer underneath even that. Stop chasing the image of success and start building the structure that actually produces it. This is where modern culture runs its quietest con. We're surrounded by the trophies of success, the car, the watch, the vacation photos. Because trophies are visible, systems aren't. Nobody posts the 4,000 small, boring decisions that built the outcome. The early mornings, the uncomfortable conversations, the years spent learning with zero recognition. People admire the castle. They skip past the foundation. Then they try to build their own life, starting from the roof down. It always collapses. Real power is strangely, almost disappointingly boring. It looks like reading while everyone else scrolls, saving while everyone else spends, listening while everyone else competes to be heard, leaving the room instead of winning an argument that was never worth winning, practicing a skill long after the initial excitement has burned off. None of it looks extraordinary in the moment. Repeat it for years, and it becomes the only thing that ever was. Compounding doesn't just apply to money, it applies to character. Every disciplined choice strengthens the next one. Every compromised value weakens the next one. This is why self-mastery feels hard at the start. You're not actually fighting today's temptation, you're fighting years of automatic behavior. And automatic behavior does not go quietly. Ask yourself something honest. How many of your current habits did you actually choose? How many were simply inherited? From family, from a workplace, from an algorithm that learned exactly which buttons to press. Most people never investigate. They inherit a belief and call it personality. But personality was never fixed. Practiced. Change the practice, and eventually you change the person standing in the mirror. This is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. Because mastering yourself usually means disappointing people who benefited from the old, more agreeable version of you, the always available version, the version that never pushed back. When you start protecting your time, some will call you distant. When you start protecting your peace, some will call you selfish. When you stop chasing validation, some will insist you've changed. They're right, you have. not into someone who cares less about people, into someone who depends less on their permission. Dependence has always been freedom's quiet enemy, which brings us to the last one, arguably the one that matters most. The goal was never to be admired. Admiration is a tide. It comes in and it goes back out. The goal was never to be feared either. Fear always breeds resistance eventually. The goal is to become internally unshakable. Someone whose decisions run on principle instead of pressure, whose confidence survives criticism, whose discipline survives boredom, whose values survive temptation dressed up as opportunity. Because once that person exists, something quietly remarkable happens. You stop trying to control the world, and for the first time, the world finds it far harder to control you. But even that isn't the deepest shift. Because real power was never about defeating other people. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs permission from anyone, including the person you used to be. By now you may have noticed this was never really about discipline. It was never really about tougher habits, or even confidence. Those are just the visible symptoms. The real transformation happens somewhere most people never think to look. In the relationship you have with yourself, in the seconds before anyone else gets a vote. Every morning, before your phone lights up, before the world asks anything of you, there's already a conversation running quietly in your head. That conversation decides almost everything that follows. Start it with doubt, and your decisions turn cautious all day. Start it with comparison, and your peace is gone before breakfast. Start it with the need to prove something, and you'll spend the next 12 hours chasing a victory that was never really yours. But start it with quiet self-respect, and the entire day bends differently. Not because life got easier, but because you've stopped negotiating with yourself every 5 minutes. Think of someone you've genuinely admired. Not because they were rich, not because they were famous, because there was something steady about them. Everyone else panicked. They stayed still. Everyone else rushed. They stayed patient. Everyone else searched for approval. They just kept doing the work. People mistake this for confidence. It's alignment. Their actions matched their values, and that kind of consistency can't be counterfeited. Here's the last paradox, and it's the one that matters. Most people spend years chasing more power, while quietly surrendering small pieces of it every single day. Every time they betray their own standards just to fit in. Every time they go silent to avoid a moment of friction. Every time they abandon something meaningful because someone else didn't understand it. Power is rarely stolen all at once. It's given away, one small decision at a time. The reverse is also true. Real power isn't recovered in one dramatic moment either. It comes back the same way it left, one ordinary decision at a time, one honest conversation, one disciplined morning, one distraction ignored, one boundary actually held, one promise kept to yourself when there was nobody around to notice. These moments look insignificant, until one day you realize they've built somebody new. Identity was never created by what you occasionally do. It's built entirely from what you repeatedly refuse to compromise. That's why the strongest people you'll ever meet usually look completely ordinary. They don't announce their discipline. They don't need the room to agree with them. Their confidence was never performed. It was practiced quietly for years. And eventually they stop asking, "How do I become successful?" and start asking something sharper. What kind of person naturally creates success wherever they go? That single question rewires everything. Success stops being something you chase and becomes a byproduct of character. Influence becomes a byproduct of consistency. Respect becomes a byproduct of integrity. Freedom becomes a byproduct of self-control. Machiavelli understood that kingdoms are rarely lost in one battle. They fall apart long before the battle, through small compromises, quiet indecision, and the slow surrender of ground nobody noticed giving away. Human lives collapse the exact same way. Nobody wakes up one day fully ruled by fear. It happens gradually, one avoided conversation, one borrowed opinion, one comfortable excuse. one forgotten promise, until the person staring back in the mirror starts to feel like a stranger wearing your face. The good news is the way back runs on the same road. Not one dramatic breakthrough, one deliberate decision, followed by another. Each one a quiet reminder that your mind was never meant to be a place ruled by fear, impulse, or somebody else's expectations. It was always meant to be the place you rule from. So the next time life hands you a hard choice, pause. Not because you're unsure, because you've learned that real power never rushes. Ask yourself one question and let it sit there before you answer. Is this decision coming from my principles or from my need to be accepted? That single question might save you a decade of living someone else's life, because the greatest victory was never convincing the world to believe in you. It was becoming someone who no longer needed the world's permission to believe in yourself. And once that shift happens, criticism becomes information instead of injury. Rejection becomes direction instead of defeat. Solitude becomes strength instead of loneliness. Discipline stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like freedom. You stop reacting to your life. You start directing it. That is the hidden path to real power, not the power to dominate anyone else. The far rarer power to stay exactly where you are, standing still, while the world tries every trick it knows to pull you away from who you already decided to become. So here's the only question worth carrying out of this video and into tomorrow morning. If nobody was watching, not one single person, who would you actually choose to become?